Now, hopefully you were able to grasp that, yes, there is an allocation, and there is some type of reasonable methodology to creating that COGS allocation and that inventory allocation. But now we need to focus on reporting for accurate calculations, right? You've got the methodology, the flow of the inputs and the products. You calculate those total costs, you have equivalent units, and then you know how to get the COGS in the inventory calculations. But what key reports do you need, or do you just need a simple one-page report? It's for you to decide. But for cultivation, you need to know a few things. You really need to know the status of the plants in the ground at the high level, and then break it down granular. So first, you're going to need a harvest schedule. Similar to the chart I showed a few slides ago, you need to understand how many plants are at each stage of the process. You're going to need to know the number of plants in the ground at each stage. You're going to need to know the date that they're planted so you can tell which stage they're at and how far along the process they are. If they're 27 days into a 100-day process, that means that they're 27% complete. You also need to know the expected yield. Maybe different strains give you different yields. So that's important to understand. Which strain is it? How far along is it? And what is the expected yield? And then you need to know when it's going to be packaged and potentially if it's already sold or when it will be sold. So next, aside from defining these report parameters, you need to define where it lives at. Is it going to be in a cultivation tracking system, or an Excel document, or a Google sheet, or something done by hand? I recommend don't doing this by hand. Make sure it's digital so you can easily share and track, but you need to figure out where this is going to live at. And then you're going to need to designate who is going to maintain and fill out this report, because if you miss this report, it becomes nearly impossible to catch up on, right? These are snapshots in time. Now, from there, you're going to need to control the system and the data, right? Who's doing it? Who's maintaining the report? What system is it on? And keeping the integrity of the data. That designated person needs to do an inventory count at the end of each month. Catch it every 30 days, because inventory, if you don't know this, it's a point in time. You can't really go back and calculate these things. Some people think that they can, but it becomes very, very messy and very, very intense when you try to go back into time. So make sure that this report is calculated at the end of every month. Now, people say that they have software that tracks their cultivation. Well, most softwares won't have an expected harvest date. They won't have a ready for sale date. They won't track projected yield. They'll only have historical yields. And I'm not saying that these softwares are not helpful or they're not powerful, but an in-person inventory count for each stage of your plants or your products if you're a manufacturer is much more granular and reliable data. Because if the software gets it wrong or doesn't have what you need, is the owner of that technology company going to come out and defend you in an audit? Probably not. They could care less. They've got their monthly subscription for you. You've signed some end user license agreement that says use at your own risk. But if you have a CPA who can help you create accurate reports and accurate data and accurate records, those can be used later in an audit to reconstruct your financial records. Having a person do this for you is critical. And yes, it may be a little bit more expensive, but this is an investment in your peace of mind and confidence in the numbers of your business. Now, some other final considerations here. First, one of the biggest challenges in an organization is departments talking and further knowing what to talk and share about. So cultivation, they don't really speak to their accounting team. They're busy working with the plants. It's pretty much different languages. So this is where a third-party CPA comes in that has cannabis experience that can bridge that gap in communication. Cultivators can focus on their operation and take a few marching orders from the CPA, and then the internal accountants can focus on their operation, taking the data that the third-party CPA gives to them, and that third-party CPA relays information, critical information, back and forth between the two departments. And maybe you get more people in there, the purchasing department, of people that are buying inputs for that cultivation operation. So it's really important that you have someone who understands all the aspects, making sure that communication is happening between all of your departments. And the last consideration here, again, I brought it up a lot of times. I was going over a simple example here. But what I really need you to understand is don't get too complex in your reporting or your calculations. The example I went over was incredibly simple and had a few variables that held constant for simplicity's sake, like the $500 per pound. That could be hard to follow if you're not a numbers person. This example that I went through, I'm sure some of you are putting questions in the chat, or you just like, oh my goodness, I don't really understand. Is a lot of numbers being thrown, a lot of mathematics. Though it's simple multiplication, it can be hard to grasp that first time. Trust me, I didn't get it the first time when Marco and I were talking about this. I had to really sit with it. So you may need to watch this presentation 2, 3, 5 times. At any rate, the key is to create a report that is very simple and easy to understand, and using a methodology that's simple and easy to understand. Don't do the whole seed to sale, one report, tracking everything. If you do, good luck keeping everything straight and organized. And if you're in a state with a seed to sale tracking requirement, those softwares like Metric, those will likely not have the info that you're looking for. So don't rely on some state-based software or state-mandated software to do this tracking for you. Create that simple report, have someone spend the 1 hour or 2 hours on the 28th of the month walking through and taking these calculations and these numbers in for you, and then let the CPA do all the allocations for you to the COGS and inventory. I need to let you know that the information contained in this webinar presentation is meant for guidance purposes only and not as professional legal or tax advice. And further, it does not give any personalized legal, tax, investment, or any business advice in general.